Welcome to another episode of The Next Fix. Today I've got a new friend. His name's Albert. And he is one of the auxiliary people as far as substance abuse and addiction and these types of things are concerned. Why? Because he's self-proclaimed an enabler. It wasn't necessarily himself that was clawing from the trenches, but he was, basically in there with another person he cared for. This is his story. So Albert, I want to say thank you for making the time to show up here and share your story with all these beautiful people. And so we're going to hit the ground running, brother. I want you to share with us. What did it look like for you, man? When things got dark for you, when you started realizing that your life had been influenced or you had been suffering as a result of addiction and things like that.
Well, for me, it's been a culmination of a number of things. And I think it started from my childhood. I always had a martyr aspect or complex, if you want to call it that, where I was always making sure everybody else was happy, giving it till it hurts, even when I didn't want to. And it could be, the way I was raised, that could have contributed to that. So I was always the type that fell under that pattern of the people pleasing and then wondering and then almost like getting some sort of resentment when that wasn't being returned, to me back.
Right.
Which is a common feature of, the people pleasing syndrome is a resentment that winds up coming from that. And so that was me. So I was always, the type that was overlooked for things.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to touch on that. That's a double-edged sword. That's pretty rough, right? It's like you're compelled to help people. And so then you put yourself out, and then the part that you cannot control is the reciprocation.
Of course,
scary, right? Because when you want to do well by people, but then if you take it to heart when it's not reciprocated, because let's face it, man, like that's part of life, man. People like so many times will not give back, and so it makes it tough for people like yourself that are givers and that are empathetic. Because it's like, man, it's just, I would say that it's more seldom that it's reciprocated than it is common. But here you are, you're an empathetic, you're a giver. It could have been something that was from childhood and in your younger days. But it had developed, right? And so do you feel like you're aware of this, or is this hindsight is 2020 and you're kind of looking back and realizing it now? I mean, how aware were you?
I think I might have been partially aware, but I was more of the mentality was, well, this is how it has to be. I'm just a nice guy. And for me, now looking back at it, of course, in hindsight was like, okay, that was only half the picture right there. And, and I always had the mentality was I need to be the savior complex. I had the major savior complex where I must be the one to come in and save people. And it was a lot of people I've encountered, whether it was addiction or not, even if they were just having a tough life, it was like, my job was I needed to save people. And, there was only one person I really needed to save, in the long run, which is myself. And so, two instances that kind of like woke me up one was on a job where in 2008, I was hired to be a full-time faculty member at a college. And I was laser focused on getting the administration and the bosses to like me, my department chair, my department, and my superiors to like me. So anytime they asked me to do something, I jumped at it to do it. And, they started adding more classes to my class load, more responsibilities. And before you knew it, I was doing like sometimes 2 or 3, times the amount of courses that a normal full-time person would be teaching. And I also told myself, well, they're going to just like me at the end, and this is great. And, about the 3rd year in it, I became like just burnt out. Physically, emotionally.
Were they kind of treating you like a doormat by that time, or did you just kind of let
Yes.
them get away with it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a doormat and there was no respect. Like I found out later on that a lot of them were bad, mouthing me behind my back. So it was, things like that. Um, and when it came time, and the ultimate thing was when it came time to get tenure, I was denied. Yeah. So it was rough, and that really rocked me to my core. And now looking back at it, I do see things I did wrong, and that was I extended myself way too much. I probably should have said no a lot more, a lot more. Now, would the outcome have changed? I don't know, but it would have saved me a lot of anguish and torture if I said no, even started to say no to the
Well,
extra
let me
task.
tell you, Albert, like that's a massive trait that you're carrying now if you are able to say no, because I would imagine, this is my opinion, is that most people cannot say no. And they will
No.
struggle, and they will also become doormats and things of that nature. But it's, and the no's can be large no's and large scale no's, or even small no's, right? It's like,
Yeah.
hey, Albert, you want to come over for dinner tonight? And instead of saying no, you come up with like an elaborate lie. Like this is something I see very common in people that I know and are very close to, right? It's like instead of being able to just say, no, thank you, right? Like that's all it takes is
Yeah.
like a no, thank you. But instead, people are just unable, they're not okay with no. And so what,
Mm-hmm.
what happens is they feel compelled to like build this elaborate story as to why they're not able to comment on this thing. And so we find ourselves building, these narratives that we find acceptable on our own accord, right?
Mm-hmm.
To comply in our own feelings, right? Because I feel like most people will accept a no thank you, especially, right? No thank you. And that's usually all it really takes. But you knowing that now is massively valuable, I imagine. I mean, are you able to say no these days?
Yeah. I mean, I still fight a little bit, but if I'm not feeling aligned, I'll say no, or I'll offer solutions even like, well, what about doing this way or asking this person? Or even if it's asking me to do something, even I might say no, just not right now, or wait till I'm working on a couple things right now. And, if you still need help with this, we can talk at another time. I'm very, it took me a while to do that. Even like I'm teaching now part time and I do the basic minimum. I don't even sign up for extra stuff. If I don't want to do it, I'm not signing up for it. And that's just the way it is.
So that's one part, though, right? Is that professionally you kind of got screwed, right? Like
Yeah.
denied today. But there's another
Yeah.
prong to this
So
sport.
even when it came down to like dating and women, I always found that I was attracted to the ones with a lot of baggage. And that
You
was
and me
just
both, brother. You and me both, brother.
yeah. And the ones that there were two times where I'm even kicking myself now where I found them to be boring. And I think, now looking back at it, I probably should have been involved with them. I probably would have had a great experience. And I'm like, because they were boring because there was no problem. Or maybe I found them boring because they were interested in me and not what I could do for them.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where I have that insight. So, but the personal thing that was mentioned right before we started recording. So I had met this person. I still run a talent agency. So at that time, I needed someone to help me in my talent agency, and so I met this lady. We'd never dated. We never was not none of that. And as we started getting to know, I noticed she had liked to drink, but it was to a point where she needed to drink during the day. Like she would actually go to work meetings, or even when she was taking classes with a water bottle, if you know what I mean. And in the water bottle was vodka or,
Uh,
a mix of something. So, and it was just, so it started off with little things. Like she asked me when she was working in the office, can she drink in the office? Now, looking back in hindsight as a business owner, I probably should have said no, not on the job.
right.
But for me, I was like, yeah, go ahead, as long as you're able to be functioning, because she was a functioning alcoholic to a point where she can at least have some sort of composure. Although I do think later on that's a myth of functional alcoholic.
Right.
But at that time, I was going into that myth because I was, under that pat her. I'm like, yeah, go ahead, go drink. And then I found
So,
myself buying her
out of
alcohol.
curiosity, I'm sorry to interrupt you again there, Albert, but like, okay, because I've never actually spoken to like, because I've had, so let me lay this out. I've been her. I've never been you in this particular circumstance, right? And so she's just out in the open. She tells you well, she says, "Hey, I'm going to drink in the office. Is that okay?" I mean, in your mind, like, you really thought like it wasn't at the time. Like, you really thought like that this wasn't a red flag, or like you weren't
No,
concerned.
not really. But people, I think I had a couple other people try to tell me like, are you crazy? Like sort of thing. And looking back in hindsight, now that I'm out of it, I was like, yeah, that I probably would have said the same thing to somebody else. Are you nuts for letting that happen? So that was like, you know, I think that even partly woke me up. I'm like, wow, I actually let that happen
Yeah.
and didn't think anything of it. And if you really want to get more to it, I was enabling her. I was going out and buying her bottles of liquor,
Yeah. Yeah.
to the office, vodka and all that. It wasn't until like, I mean, the wool came out because I found myself getting more and more attached to her. And towards the end of it, she was like, had these dark moods, which is common when someone who's an alcoholic to have dark mood and substance abuse to have dark moods. And it was like very bipolarish with her. It was like, okay, there was one, I didn't know which side I was going to get one day. But I found that the more that she pulled away, the more I latched on. And then when I started reading about codependency, I'm like, this sounds like me to a T. It's just the opposite way. Usually it's the girlfriend or the wife that's codependent and the male being an alcoholic. This is role reversed, but the same principle. And
Yeah.
then, I would say that kind of the proverbial, you know, in the fan would be one day she happened to leave her email open. Of course, I got a little nosy, and I read like entire threads where she was just completely trashing me
Oof.
to clients, to people we worked with, and bad. And she was actually starting her own, competitive agency while still working for me. So I had to
Okay.
let her go. I had to let her go. I mean, immediately right on the spot.
Well, what was she
And
saying about you, man? Like, what was she saying? Like, I don't know. Like, what was she saying about you? Like, how bad could it have been?
that I was a POS, that I was, she really hated me so much that, I would never amount to not, as a business owner, I'm horrible and like things like that. And it was, when I was reading it, it was interesting my reactions because, was I surprised? No, actually.
Wow. Okay.
I remember reading that. I'm like, I can't really say I'm surprised. More, it was like my eyes are open.
Right. That you're kind of like pigeonholed into being aware. Like, it's like no
Yeah,
more. Like, this isn't really happening. Like, she's not
and
an
and then
alcoholic.
and yeah, and now I was like, oh my god. And then I think for like a couple of weeks I was like hopped on adrenaline, because I was just like, so this is really happening. And for me, there was no choice. I had to let her go. I mean, the next day she came in, I just was kind of like, I need your key. And, I didn't say about the emails going bad. I used the excuse, you were starting a competitive company under me. I can't have this. Which anybody would have. I mean, if I did that with any company, started with competitor while I was working for them, I would have been escorted by HR to my, with security out of the office immediately. So I fired her, and I never heard from her ever again. But I remember sitting back healing from that. I'm like, wow, okay, a lot of things I can unpack here
Yeah.
because it was extreme codependency. I was so convinced that I was the one that could help her.
Right. And so now let me ask you, just like kind of out of curiosity here, man. Right. Like, when you're buying the alcohol, and this is such an opportunity, by the way, for myself, because I'm speaking to somebody that is a self-proclaimed enabler, and looking back, right? I want to know, when you're buying the alcohol for her, knowing she's drinking it under your employment, right? How exactly do you feel like you were helping her? Like, what was going through your mind, or how did you justify that purchasing her alcohol was actually making the situation better? Or
Well, she's doing such a great job. I need to keep her around. I don't want to lose her.
oh,
And
okay,
so that was my codependency kicking in. I don't want to lose her.
okay, all right. So
You,
she was valuable
yeah,
at
she was
some.
valuable to
Okay,
some level. Now looking back at it, when I look back at it from a more third person standpoint, I'm like, that's questionable whether how much valuable she was. At that time, I can say that's what I thought going
right.
in my
So
head.
you're thinking, okay, well, I have to buy her alcohol because I have to appease her, and
Hmm.
this is what makes her, copacetic with working for me, and so I need to do this, and so that makes sense. Okay, so you're thinking, well, I don't want to lose her. This is how I don't lose her. I provide this alcohol. It makes her happy enough to stay around and work for me. Okay, it makes sense.
Yeah, and it was really to a point where it makes sense at that time, and one and we can talk a little bit with the lessons that I've unpacked from this after once I was removed and the situation ended. I know the right situation happened. She had to go. It was a very ugly fight. We had a fight. She walked out. Kind of pissed off, and I never heard from her again. And this was about 12 years ago. When
Got it.
she walked out, and I never heard from her in 12 years. And
Yeah.
I know I never will. But the point is, afterwards, it was just like, it was more of a wake up call, for me. And I found myself sometimes starting to go down that path and then pull myself back out, and say, okay,
What
I
is
need.
what does that look like? Give me an example. Like, are you encountering more people that you want to save? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're
Sort of
referencing?
like I started with, I need to say, and then I pull back. I'm like, no, they gotta do their own thing. I can be there for them, but I'm not going down this path. And I've learned to start saying no, and putting myself foot down. Because I also, right after the pandemic, I had entered a business partnership with someone who I actually proud of myself, I walked away from. Because it started to get, not in the same way. I mean, this wasn't anything had to do with alcohol. I mean, this person was actually sober. But it was just a gaslighting situation. But I
Hmm.
was able to have the wherewithal this time to say no, I'm out, and I'm walking away. Got a lawyer involved. I had a lawyer negotiate my exit, and it was out of the partnership. But the old me would have stayed, probably would have latched down even harder. Like, please stay, whatever it took. I don't want to lose this person. So I was really happy and proud of myself when I walked away from that situation. But yeah, I do find like sometimes they're like, oh, I really, no, okay, I'm going to take a step back. And then, like I said, a lot of lessons I learned from that experience with her. I mean, I think that was probably the most significant teaching moment in my life, was that
Right.
moment.
And so let me ask you. So all right, moving forward, right? And just curiosity about where you're at these days, right? Like, so what does life look like for you now? I mean, because I don't know. You mentioned teaching, and then you still kind of do that part time, but and also talent agency. And so then I guess how did that develop into your current success and where you're at now? What are you up to?
Well, like I said, when that happened, I was at a crossroad because that was right around the time that my full time teaching job was ending. So I think what happened was I took a 360-degree interest and became fully entrenched with my agency.
Okay.
And actually, it worked to a point where I got it a lot higher and more established, because I knew now I need to work for this. I need to work hard and move past this. So I was able to do that by just really working hard and being focused and doing things that I wanted to do now, try new things
Yeah.
that I was on my own. With her, what I noticed right afterwards, which is surprising, I was so nervous about losing her that when it happened, I was so, after a few weeks of being on my own, I was like, I didn't know how great this is going to feel being on my own. It was so amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
free, I'm free, and I can do what I want to do now fully.
Right. Isn't that funny, Albert? Like, okay, so like you're mentioning how great you felt after the fact, right? So further on down the road, how free and amazing, how untethered you are to this individual who's sick, right? And so that being said, oftentimes when an opportunity like the teaching opportunity, your position is the door is slammed shut in your face. And so many times in our lives, right, that door hits us right in the nose. And it
Hmm.
hurts like, and we can't see anything but the door that is shut right in our face. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
here it is, that door of teaching is boom, is slamming you shut and it's painful. And then here's this person that you had forced to exit, right? Which takes a lot of courage, by the way, to push this person out of your agency. You push them away. So here you are, door shuts in your face. You have no idea. And this is the tricky part about that door shutting in your face. You have no idea that just down the hall that there's a better opportunity and that there's
Yeah.
another door that's cracking open. It's cracked open, but you can't see a damn thing because this door just shut. Boom, it hits you, and you have no idea the better opportunity, the better path is just right down the hall. It's just a few feet away, but you have no way of knowing. But then, as you had mentioned, right, you move down the hall, right? You take this opportunity of pouring yourself into your agency, right? And so when you had done that, right, when you really gave it your all in this agency, this is what had developed, right? And it's freeing, right? So this is where we're at, right? Your agency, it took off as a result of these bad circumstances, if you want to call them that, right? You
Yeah.
took the lessons, the silver linings, and then you applied what you had learned into this agency. And so how's that look these days?
It looks really, really good. Um, and I get to do what I want. I get to, to be more focused. And again, in that old situation, even a situation I was tensioned after the pandemic, I was able to stand up for myself and stand my ground. And you were right. I mean, when I had to fire her immediately, it was the toughest thing I've ever had to do and
Mm,
scary
yeah.
because I didn't know how she was going to act. I didn't know how, could this be a violent situation?
Right.
Eh,
She's half drunk, right? Like she's half drunk, ready to brawl, and you're like, hey, you gotta, pack your stuff and kick rocks. You probably
Yeah.
wish that the whole team of HR to like walk her out. You're like,
Yeah, well, it was my own company, so there was no HR person there for me. So that was definitely scary, but I think it really helped me to do that. Like it was something I needed to do. I couldn't, have anybody else do it for me. This is something that had to come from me, being that I own the company,
yeah,
and it's my livelihood. So I had to do that, but I'm glad I did. So and I think you know looking back in hindsight, the reason why I recovered from the I need to save other people because there's only one person I can save, and that's myself. And that's sort of like one of those steps I feel for recovery from codependency is you can only really save yourself and focus on that.
yeah. Let me ask you this, Albert. Did you ever like get in? I mean, specifically, or did you technically start participating or learning about codependency? And then, like, there's different groups, right?
Yeah,
And
I didn't. I mean, I did it kind of self-taught. I mean, there was part of me that was like, well, maybe I will, um, maybe I will do the codependency anonymous, but I was like, maybe I won't. I don't know. Like I didn't know if I wanted to do 12 steps, but I was definitely looking into that, for a while. But I was like, reading a book about like, family secrets and family betrayal by an author by the name of John Bradshaw. And I read the book and, he was talking about like, what it's like sometimes growing in a dysfunctional household and how it would lead to codependency. And I almost felt like he was talking to me, when he was writing that. I was like, this sounds so like me. And so that's what kind of happened. It was just, it took, but it took that jolting experience for me to kind of, take a step back.
right, yeah, and good on you for that, right? And so I can hear the resilience in your voice now. Like you
Hmm.
seem the type of person that is no longer the doormat, right? Like you
Yeah.
went through all with the teaching scenario and that circumstance of getting burned, of not getting that tenure, and then using that as fuel right? To step up the agency and what that looks like. So, well, tell me more about the agency, man. Tell me what's going on, or tell me what you're up to these days with
Yeah,
this Albert, right? Like,
yeah,
what is the new Albert doing?
yeah. Well, like I said, I wrote the book last year. Wrote my first book. I'm going on, the podcast tours. I'm trying, getting my name out there.
Yeah.
Something I never would have thought about doing, 5 years ago. It took me a long time to even write the book. I was like, you know, uh,
How long did it take you? How long did it take you to write the book?
well, the actual when I actually sat down with execution, 2 months, but the actual idea of writing a book was like 7, 8 years.
Got it. Right.
So it wasn't until like July of 2023 where I said, okay, I've got to do something because otherwise I'm going to be, one of the stats of people who say they want to write a book and never do. One of the I was reading in one of the groups author groups I belong to on Facebook, and it was saying that the stat is that only 1% of people who say they want to write a book go through with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so 99% don't. And I'm like, well, I'm easily becoming that other 99%. So I'm like, I got to be that 1%. So I sat down in July of 2023 for, in front of a computer, and I spent about 2 hours a night writing.
There we go.
And I did that for about 2.5 months. And then I had my first the manuscript. So I said, okay, now I'm going to do 2 rounds of edit. And I did 2 rounds of editing. I had 2 different editors who did a complete workup.
Right. Right.
I, then had the final copy. I then, contacted a cover designer, and a formatter. Did all that, and next thing you know, I'm on KDP, and here we go.
Well,
I have my book.
first of all, real quickly though, tell us all the title. We're going to repeat this a few times, but just hit us all with the title. So
Sure. The title is called Rise Above the Script. It's confronting self-doubt and mastering self-sabotage for performing artists.
Beautiful. Now, going to this process, right? Like, what was the hardest part for you in the development, in the production, and the?
I think just sitting down and doing it.
Okay.
Before it was just, I always had that fear of, because I would start and stop. I'd start a couple of pages and then delete them. I'd start a couple of pages and delete it. And this time I said, otherwise I'm just going to be sitting here forever, starting a couple pages and deleting. And, it wasn't until, of course, this was months later, when, that I heard that there'll never be a perfect, first couple of pages. You just got to rip off the Band-Aid and do it. And that's, my whole fear was, what if I get bad reviews? And then another part of my voice is, so what if you do? What's the worst that can happen? You'll be fine. And sometimes even bad reviews can actually help the sales of the book. So I was like, okay, let me do it. And I did. And I'm proud of myself, because it's like a badge of honor. Thank you. To add the author to my identity, now.
Yeah. And so Ernest Hemingway has a quote, and he says, your first draft will be shit. I might be butchering the actual quote verbatim, but it's something along those lines, is that your first draft is always shit. And it's the truth, man.
Yeah.
But that's the key. That's the beauty. Like, being able to start with that, right? However rough it may be, is the point, right? There's another phrase I really like to live by, is that the interim between the thought of an action and the actual action is like a hideous dream.
Yeah.
And so to kind of unpack that, is like the thought of doing something like writing, you think about writing a book, and then the interim, the in between, and then the actual starting in the writing and the production of the book, right? The interim is like a hideous dream. And so this can last for some people forever. It can last forever for some people.
It can really do.
They're the 99%, right? But so, but the shorter that you can make that, right? The distance between that thought of an action and the actual action, right? If you could shrink that distance, it's the key to like so many things, man.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share with you my worst in publishing my own book is like the editing, man. I couldn't handle somebody telling me I'm wrong, like a legitimate opinion, right? Like, I can handle like reviews or something like that, but like the editor just like ripping me to pieces, brother, Oh, it was painful. I
Yeah.
was like struggling. Like I was like, man, I got to redo this, and it was so tough for me, man. That was my hardest part of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't easy, but it was at least now I had something to do because, when you get back the edits and you see markups on every page, I'm like, well, ouch, okay.
And you were a
Yeah.
teacher. You were a teacher. You know,
Yeah,
it's like red,
I don't,
red mark
I'm
all
like,
over.
wow. I mean, and now look back at it, I'm like, well, it's good. That's why I paid them. I want them to do write the red marks. Um, and then that somebody said to me, brought that, same thing. You're a teacher, and they said, well, would you rather pay someone to edit it and they don't come back with anything and tell you it's great, and it's not, so. And then I transferred a lot of stuff, and then I went to a second editor after that was done, who did the same thing. I mean, it was a little bit less the second time around, but I still had a lot of red markings. Okay, great. Gave me a lot of things I didn't even think about. So, and that really kind of helped me out tremendously, was when I was able to just, let it go and then do the changes and let it go. And then as soon as the second editor was done, we incorporated all the changes. That's when I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to put it out there.
So
And
let me ask you: is there a section? Do you speak to the codependency and kind of functioning, coexisting with an alcoholic in there? Is that inside of
not
the?
necessarily, but my next book actually is going to be sort of like, it's not going to be a book about codependencies per se, but it's going to be about the martyr complex. That's what I'm working on right now,
Right.
which I
Okay.
feel is, I'm going to tie in codependency and people pleasing, because that's
Yeah.
what really we're doing, when we're being a martyr in a
Right.
situation.
And
And
so I think like you could speak to this is that like it could be almost like a high in itself. It could be almost like this a high in itself of like becoming the martyr, right? Like, and I've seen people they appear to be addicted to, right? The doormat syndrome, right? Like that
oh
they're like
yeah,
addicted to.
absolutely. It gives you a sense of purpose, and you really feel like you're helping people. And you actually resent other people when they point it out to you, like, "Well, you're being a doormat." It's like we don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And
That is so peculiar. Well, at least it seems it's enlightening me currently to hear you say that that's a part of the process. That one, it hurts to hear that somebody is calling you a doormat when you wholeheartedly believe that you are making that person better, whichever person that may be.
yeah, of course,
That's crazy, man. So, all right. So, okay, you've got the first book. Please say the title again, because you went into the subtitle
sure,
and you lost me a little bit just because I had my memory is shot.
sure. It's Rise Above the Script. That's the first part, and the second part is confronting self doubt and mastering self sabotage for performing artists.
Right. Okay. Now, all right. So that now is the second book or your next publication? Is that going to be a continuation of it? But and I don't believe so. Right. What does that look like?
No, no, this one's going to be about the martyr complex and the martyr archetype. This is going to be more of a personal thing than, I mean, it's going to be self help, but it's going to be more of a personal story too. Because I'm going to talk about these instances too in the book.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I mean, that is so. Well, I guess when.
I'm estimating by like March or April of next year.
Okay. Now, how do you feel about the process of book publishing the second time around? How do you feel about that? Because
A lot
I've
more
only got
confident.
one. I've only got the one underneath my belt, right? So I'm curious because eventually I'm going to be in the same boat.
I think it's a little bit easier now because I saw what happened the first time. So I
Right.
think, rather than taking 7 or 8 years, it's only taking gonna take me one, you know, than seven. And so now I just know that I just gotta write it and then take it to an editor and then, let the editor do their job and then me to, reincorporate it and then send it along my way.
Right, right. Okay. And so we've got that coming early next year. And well, I guess I'm really curious though, man, like, for the sake of the audience, like what could you say because, the majority of the people that I speak to that the audience is comprised of is people that are on, hopefully on the better end of a recovery journey. However, like for some of these people that are out there that are suffering from the doormat syndrome, or they are currently codependent with somebody that has a substance abuse problem, like what kind of advice or what kind of wisdom could you shed upon them that you think that could help?
Well, I think number one is knowing your worth and um, really taking a step back and honoring yourself is probably the biggest thing. Just really knowing, who you are. Even like, being easy on yourself, I think it's great you want to help people. If you're tapped out, how are you going to help other people? And so I say the main thing is just, working on yourself and being kinder to yourself, because very often we're hard on ourselves, extra hard on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I think that you've really, like I said, you've enlightened me a little bit. You've shed some light on what it looks like on the other end. Because as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I have been that person, that alcoholic that has been in the professional sense, and I put it on the employer, or I put it on them. I've had conversations where, an employer might be asking me about my drinking and things like that, and I would do everything and anything to perpetuate my problem and my
Yeah.
youth. And so I have been in the circumstance, or I've been her, right? I've been her, and not to defend her, but like, I know that I myself, it didn't matter what my employer said to me. I had one mission,
Yeah.
and that was to perpetuate my substance abuse. That was, my brain only had one gear. It only had one direction to go in. And if it took lying or stepping all over an employer or friend, that's what I was going to do. So it's wild. It's so interesting to me to hear it from your standpoint, although it's also, kind of heartbreaking, right? Because you truly were only doing what you thought was helping. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy, man. And I really do appreciate you, like I said, like giving me a peek behind the curtain. And a lot of us, right? Now, yeah, Albert, like tell us a little bit about where to find you, man. Like where is the best place to get these
Sure.
books, what you're up to? And you said you've been doing a podcast tour. What do you got going on, man?
Well, you can find me, on Instagram or LinkedIn. If you follow on LinkedIn, you could just link up about Albert Bramante. On Instagram, I'm at Dr. Al Bramante. And, follow me there. I'll be posting a lot of the content. And then you could also buy my book on Amazon. It's available as a paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. Nice.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I'm going to have everything lined up for everybody in black and white just so everybody can find you, man. But this has been an incredibly enlightening experience. I really do appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story, brother. And for everybody else, this has been another episode of The Next Fix. We'll see you on the next one.
All right, thank you.